Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weiss, and joining me, as always, Garrett Allen. How's it going, man?
Ben, we are now at that point of the year. And by the way, if everyone is already listening to this, they know that my voice is just absolutely screwed up. So don't know what happened. I was already sick like last month. So don't know like if I'm just coming down with something else, if I was just getting too excited for the Steelers making the playoffs, even though they don't deserve to be there. But we are now at the point of the year where there's like 5 straight months of nothing but sit down grinding content. So I hope you're ready to deal with me during that 5 month period, and you know what that's like. But in the meantime, I'm ready to get into today's show.
Sounds good. I think we maybe got one new rating and review on Apple. I think we're
Yeah,
even on Spotify currently. Is that right?
yeah. For people listening, I may have had a mess up on Apple. It may have been my fault. It might be really, really bad, like my fault. So I'm working on that. But stay tuned. Sorry, but we'll get back to you on that.
But today we got plenty to talk about still, despite really not a lot of races obviously going on. We recently released our freshman class rankings, which are always funny or fun, not funny, fun to talk about. But before we dive into that, we did get one piece of transfer news, and that was, of course, Emily Covert heading to Tennessee as a grad transfer. Huge pickup for a Tennessee team that obviously overperformed expectations this past year and now is adding a true low stick to this team. And I feel like gives them a legit chance at finishing on the podium now. And that's really not something I thought we could say about this team like even 2 months ago.
No, no, it's such a massive win. And you kind of figured that Carlson would go out and go get someone else. It felt like that team was, he's a transfer guy, likes the transfer portal. I didn't know if he would land someone quite like that. It's huge. It's not just huge for the firepower aspect, but it's also huge from the perspective of you now have a veteran who's
Hmm.
stable, who even with some of her illnesses and injuries, she's still showing up and giving you great value. And I think with her they would have been fifth place at the national meet last year. Um, and they also would have been, within striking distance of Notre Dame for the podium. And so now it really does come down to it's for me, it's just one less spot that they do have to worry about. Because let's be
Right.
honest, Tennessee's success last fall, specifically at the national meet, that was we're like, wow, where did that come from? That was pretty
Outlier.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can they do it again? Right. And there was a lot of can they do it again questions for them, but I think now that they have Covert, that's one less that they have. And I like Ashley Jones a lot, or is that her name? Am I getting that right? Ashley Jones, their 42nd place finisher. I like her as well. I think at the very least stabilizes the lineup, puts you in the hunt for
Mhm.
the podium, and it just gives you one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a nice backstop from any just like regression that could happen next year. Like obviously they just had a fantastic last few weeks of the season. And for us to expect them to be able to do that again next year when like everything seemingly went right, everything doesn't have to go right for them to have a similar kind of result. Now that they have a true bona fide low stick with Emily Covert. So great, I think a great matchup between both athlete and program going into next year.
Yeah, and I think not only that, but if you're the Tennessee women, you're thrilled. You just got a true, well-known name, highly recognizable name to join your program that's still new, young, and upcoming. And I think it
Yeah.
validates a little bit of what Sean Carlson is doing over there, the names that they're adding, and we'll talk about, some of the names that they have added, soon. But yeah, I think it was a massive win all around, and um, surprised initially that she was going to go there, but then in reality, I go, no, I mean it makes sense. Like he's had great success with 10K runners. I would imagine it's the same with her.
Absolutely. Okay, why don't we move on to our freshman class rankings and how do we want to go through these? Do we want to kind of pick out certain teams that we thought were hard to rank? Do we want to go through specific ones that are or more high profile?
Well, let's just put it this way. what's the one team where and do you have your just missed up by chance? Do you have the just missed teams?
Let me pull that up as we are talking.
Okay, because I was
Um,
gonna say what we should do is I was gonna say first off, who are the teams that you believe maybe got robbed or would have liked to see within our top 10? And these are all, now posted and they've been posted and they're posted on Instagram, so we're not exactly spoiling anything. Um, but let me hear. I can send this to you right now if you'd like.
yeah. Why don't you go ahead? I'm pulling mine up right now.
Sure. So for the men, I think it's Cal Poly. That was a brutal one. It's just they have so much depth. They have a star, like key name in Chris Gaudillo, who has run 405, 845 for 3,200 meters, 1453. Cal Poly is just it's now getting to a point where they were able to mesh guys like him, and yet they still get a ton of middle distance guys. They had Parker Long and Mateo Malco Allen who have run 153 for 800 meters, as well as Tyler Downs, who has run 152 and then sub 9 for 3,200 meters. They were well rounded. They had like a top tier name. They had guys that kind of fit what they're trying to do and hit their mold. Um, but it was tough at the end of the day to leave them out, and I really wonder if we made a mistake there.
I'm gonna go with NAU. I mean, you
Yeah,
have a tried and true star in Aaron Solomon, and then you have guys that just are like really good fits for the program, like Zach Munson. I mean, he just an aerobic monster coming to NAU. He's going to you got to think at some point he's going to be a big time contributor for this team. I mean, comes in with a 14:27 5K, run well in the 2 mile big meets. I got to imagine he's going to be a big signing for them, even if it takes a year or two. And then you can say the same thing about Ford Washburn. Like it's a very good class that in most years I think warrants a top 10 place in our rankings.
yeah, that was brutal. I think did I call you about them when
Yeah,
we were
I
trying
think
to say?
I was gonna say we've had a few conversations about these rankings about just like pulling our hair out about how we're gonna rank these teams.
Yeah, I remember calling Ben and just being completely confused between them and like a few other teams in our 10-9-8 range. I think we got it right, but man, does that stink. I mean, like the having a true star, a true standout star in Solomon, and then have two guys who, would it surprise us if they evolve into All Americans? No, it wouldn't. And they're great fits for NAU. And that one in particular really stings. But again, I don't think we got it wrong. I actually do think we got that one right. For the women's side, who's a team that you struggled with?
North Carolina. I mean, again, it's like a similar in the similar mold of NAU. You got a great star in Kiara O'Shea, and then you have a nice lineup of women behind her and Emily Lamatagni,
Sure, Lamatanga. Sure.
Malin Higgins. I mean, again, like just women that I think are a good fit developmentally for this North Carolina program, and then you just have a stud up front who we think can be a pretty quick instant impact runner for this team. And again, like this is just a like this is just testament to how good a lot of these recruiting classes are, where you can have this kind of firepower and be on the outside looking in for our top 10.
Yeah, if someone wanted to rank them, I don't think I would have
No.
totally disagreed. I think it would have been very fair. The O'Shea and Lamontague kind of 1-2 punch, and then you get a sub 210 girl in the 800 meters. That's like
Mhm.
phenomenal firepower. It's phenomenal balance. It's just really really good. Um, I, I think it's understandable if we had him on just miss, but I don't think they were
Yeah.
necessarily robbed either. I think it really was a coin flip, but I do agree that was a great one. I'm furious that we left off Utah. I argued with Mara and she's like, fine, do it. I go, no, we will let the team decide. And so we let the team decide, and everyone had Wake Forest. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I love Utah. I think Utah is so underrated. They only have a few women, but
Yeah.
they have Kyla Martin, who has run
8.
206.
Oh,
It's actually
really?
206. I got to adjust that actually.
Okay.
Um, I think it was just a classic typo. 206 and 418 for 1500 meters. Then you have Katarzyna Nowakowska from Poland. It's run 2:10 and 4:25 for 1,500 meters and 16:34 for 5,000 meters. And they have Anastasia Peters, who was a cross country All
She was
American this past
awesome.
fall. She was so good. And now I'm just gonna just casually mention Grace Moroney, who's a 452 miler. When a 452 miler is getting like an honorable mention, last second mention, that's
Yeah.
how you know you have a great class. I was furious Utah did not get ranked. I thought they should have been ranked, and I'm forever salty. I'm sorry, Utah. I tried.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think this is just a testament to how good these recruiting classes have been this year. So with the just miss out of the way, why don't we transition to maybe talking about two or three teams at a time on the men and women's side? So let's start on the women's side. Uh, at 10th, we had NAU, ninth, Wake Forest, and 8th, Oklahoma State. Who out of this group kind of stood out to you? And obviously, we talked about Utah just not making it. NAU was that last team in. What kind of differentiated them in your mind? Or not, or yeah, Northern Arizona, or no, sorry, was it Wake Forest who was last team in? What
No, I
differentiated
do.
them?
I do think we had Wake Forest
Yes,
at
Wake Forest was
10.
10. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Um, Yeah, I think with the thing with Wake Forest, and I think why we really liked them was they had Brooke Wilson, right? Like that was a really big thing for her. I mean, she was a true stud this past fall, really strong. But it was more so because of like a lot of the other women that they had who were solid across the board. It's just what Wake Forest needed as a team, right? Because we saw the kind of impact that they had this past fall. Wake Forest wasn't amazing, but they were decent. They had a decent squad, and you kind of pair what they did and you kind of think, okay, well, Angelina Perez is coming in next year. They've got a very strong 5K runner from overseas coming in next year. I believe she's around like 15:56 or something like that. I don't know specifically. But the future is very, very bright. And if they didn't have this class, I don't know if the foundation is quite as strong for that future as maybe it would be now. Brooke Wilson, I think, changes a lot of that, and I just don't know how many freshman classes were as impactful for the future of their own respective teams, even if it wasn't as good as some of the other teams in our just missed
Sure.
column as Wake Forest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you've seen how they've built this team on the men's side, and I think this is kind of one of a key step for the Wake Forest women to really get to that national relevance the same way the men's program did, and having stud freshmen who you have under uh, team control, for lack of a better word, for the next few years is massive. And obviously they've been great at developing men and women during their time leading that program. For NAU, it's interesting. We don't usually talk about a true freshman transfer in our recruit rankings, but Carrie Balaga making that switch from Colorado after the first semester to Northern Arizona, I mean, arguably gives them one of the top like best duos of recruits coming in this year when you pair her with Emma Stutzman, who, I mean, PRs are ludicrous.
Right.
439 in the 16, 917 in the 3K. Like, I mean, put her right in the mix for indoor qualification right off the bat, just off those times, which is absolutely incredible. Um, I mean, the depth is also solid, but I just keep coming back to those top two.
Yeah, I mean that's really where the value comes in. I think if Balaga hadn't transferred in, I don't know if NAU's ranked. In fact, I don't think they
No,
are.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. And so I think it's very easy to get distracted by the depth and how many women a certain group has and event balance. But the fact of the matter is that Balaga and Stutzman are just two really, 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 really good runners, and they've got nice little supporting cast there as well. With I believe is it Abby Bass? I want to say yeah, Abby Bass and Ava Mitchell. Solid names, sub 4 minute or sub 5 minute 1600 meter runners, sub 11 over 3200 meters. I think Bass has run 10:44 for 2 miles. They're a solid, solid group. And I think that the heavy hitters of Balaga and Stutzman's what really gets them there. Um, BYU 8. I think we accidentally said
Yeah,
Oklahoma at
sorry,
State
I
early.
was looking at the wrong list, so
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we had it misordered
I think
there.
that was our first order list out of like the 10 adjustments that we made. Um, but luckily, it wasn't that far off either. BYU at 8. I don't really have a whole lot here. I don't think it was their best ever recruiting class, but when you're not your best ever is still 8, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, again, this is just what they do. They bring in some women with star potential. I mean, obviously Grace Hutchinson comes in and you like what she could do, but then you also bring in all these women that just have potential of being solid scorers who maybe one or two of them pop in a way you don't expect. But under Coach Dilgy Taylor, like this is just how she puts together great teams year
Yep.
in and year out, which is super impressive to watch. Um, let's transition to the men's side. At 10, we have California Baptist. Ninth, we have Washington. And eighth, North Carolina. I'm not quite as familiar with this California Baptist recruiting class. So why don't you walk me through that real quick?
Very odd class. Usually for the California Baptist men, when they go for home run like top 10
Yeah.
classes, as they have in the past, they're usually fairly large, heavy overseas presence, obviously, and that's still the case with this group. But they're also very long distance centric. And that's not necessarily not the case. But here's the thing, Joaquin Campos has run 151 for 800 meters and 345 for 1500 meters. Mateje Rebecca, I don't know if I'm saying that right, 153 for 800 meters, 347 for 1500 meters. And then Pedro Marin, 150 for 800 meters, 354 for 1500 meters. Phenomenal middle distance chops. That is a complete deviation from the endurance aerobic centric heaviness that California Baptist has been looking to establish over the past years. However, Campos has also run 806 in the 3K. He's also run 1435 in the 5K. Hebreka has run 90. He's run 1410 in the 5K, and then Marine has run 818 in the 3K. They can do it all.
Yeah.
They can do it all, and really, the only reason why they're back at 10 is just because of the number of guys. And I think they have three guys. There's one developmental name in Jacob Orta, but I mean, these guys can do everything at an extremely high level. And if just one rookie came in and was running 150, then we'd be like, well, that's a marquee recruit or close to it. Um, so that's a very unusually dynamic freshman class.
Yeah, it seems like they really prioritize just guys who can be three-season athletes for them, and that's something that it seems like they hadn't always, where they were very focused on getting this team as competitive as possible on the grass. And now you bring in these guys who obviously look like they have the potential to do that in cross country, but they also have really great scoring power in the track. So I think they'll be certainly one to watch. And they they don't really have. Again, I'm trying to pick who I would say is their big star, because these are international guys and they don't have the same kind of attention. But when you have these PRs in like the 5K as well, on top of like these 800, 1500 meters, like it doesn't really matter that they've flown under the radar, because they already look like very solid middle of the lineup scorers on almost any NCAA team.
Yeah, I mean, they're just that good. I mean, like it's like we always look for a marquee recruit in every class. And it's like, well, yeah, they don't have any marquee recruits because three of them are equally as good
Yeah.
and they're all really, really good. Moving on to CBU, Washington 9 was an interesting one. I
Hmm.
like them a lot. Tyrone Gores, I'm a big Tyrone
Yeah.
Gores guy. I think you know. They brought in Thomas Diamond from overseas, 757 3K runner. But what I thought was super interesting was the guys after that. Because if you're Washington, if those guys come to you and you're like, hey, we want to be Huskies, you're like, yes, you come here. You're absolutely going to be Huskies. Even if they are aerobic centric, cross country dominant, long
Yeah.
distance guys. And Diamond can kind of go down a little bit in 1500 meters. But,
Sure.
you know, that aside, guys like Cruz Corvin and who was the other name here?
Will
Will
Schneider.
Schneider, they're not really middle distance guys either. I mean,
Yeah.
Schneider has run 407 for 1500 meters, and Corvin's run 4:11 in the mile, but these guys are true long distance guys. Schneider has run 8:53 in the 2 mile, whereas Corvin has run 8:57 over 3,200 meters. They've both run under 15 minutes for 5,000 meters. It's a surprisingly like long distance heavy roster, which I don't think we expected from Washington.
No, and I think Coach Powell has proven that he can bring in some middle distance talent to really that's a little bit more proven maybe
Like the
and
transfer
kind of
portal.
yes, exactly, transfer portal wise. And so I think with this recruiting class, he's really focused on developing maybe some of the areas where he feels the roster is a little light, and adding some aerobic centric guys. I think is going to be a huge payoff for them in cross country over the next few years, where they don't have to rely on the Luke Hausers, Nathan Greens, Joe Wascoms of the world, who are really just true milers who are having to really step up to the 10K. And they can have a little bit more consistency, I think, with their lineup, relying on more of these 10K oriented guys.
Yeah, then they're certainly going to need it, especially after what happened this
Yes,
past fall, and then those guys just leave soon either. Anyway, so it kind of it was a well timed addition. I mean, obviously, I think they probably could have won a little bit more out of that class, specifically Gores on the regional stage, but that's neither here
sure.
nor there. North Carolina, love North Carolina, love this team. Think it's awesome. Big Noah Brecker guy, I think he's
Hmm.
awesome, but they also have a 147 guy and then a ton of great milers. Like guys who are running under 410 for 1500 or for 1600 meters and for the mile. I mean, it's a wildly balanced class. Some of these guys are great tactically. Like Laney's run 407 in the mile. I just like Andrew Regnier running 147 just blows my mind. Um, I was so impressed by this class. I very much wanted to put them a little bit higher, but the teams that I love more than them, I also want to put a little bit higher. Does that make sense?
No, it's crazy that this class isn't higher than eighth. Like you have a star in the 800. Obviously, you have a star level like cross country type of recruit in Brecker, and then you have in Sapone another like star level like just do it all like
Yeah,
athlete.
a lot
151
of
in the
these
eight
guys
hundred.
can do it all.
1456 in the 5K. I mean, it's just you go through and everybody click like you said, they can do it all. They check every single box that you would really want. And you have star power, you have like solid floors for a lot of these guys. Again, Coach Miltenberg has been able to put together great classes and really develop talent. You think of like someone like Ethan Strand, who has just developed into a star and is someone who can do everything well. You look at this group of guys, and it wouldn't be stunning to see if we saw another Ethan Strand or two out of this class.
I think my only critique with them is that this North Carolina team is very clearly trying to get on the podium for cross country, and these guys, a lot of these guys can run cross country, and I'm not saying that they can't
Yeah.
or that they can't be great contributors. They can, but Brecker's really the only guy where I'm like, oh, that's a highly potent cross country talent that I feel confident moving forward. I don't know that for sure about every other guy. A lot of those guys are mile guys who can also move up and down effectively. I would have liked them to maybe beef up the more long distance side, especially because you're going to lose Alex Phillip. You're going to
Yeah.
lose Jake Gebhard. You're going to lose probably one other name who I'm not remembering. So, Parker Wolf's at the near end, tail end of his
Yep.
eligibility. So I would have liked something a bit more there, and I think that's ultimately why we held them back to 8.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. On the women's side, let's go through our 7 through 5. Coming in seventh, we have Virginia. In sixth, we have Oklahoma State. And in fifth, we have Notre Dame. Virginia obviously has Tatum David, who was just great from the get go. Obviously, came in with elite PRs 205 in the
Mhm.
800, 417, 15, 948 in the 32. And then you bring in a lot of other women who are also very solid. Jillian Bushy, really, really good.
Boucher.
Boucher, sorry, made an impact right away. Kate DeSosa. I mean, you run through this list again. You have solid depth, but then you also have a star in Tatum David, who has already proven that she has that potential at the next level.
Tatum David's so good. She's so good. And even when she was, I think dealing with an injury at some point in high school, and like a lot of the times you do get worried about some of these star talents who maybe do get an injury at the
Hmm.
prep level, and you wonder like, well, how's that going to translate? But she ran some of her best times as a senior. I mean, her middle distance marks largely came during the tail end of her senior year, and for that, I mean, that is to me such a massive, massive win. She can run anything effectively from like the 800 meters up to cross country. And frankly, when you look at the entire collection of Virginia runners, that's kind of what they do. They can kind of do a little bit of everything. They have great middle distance runners. They're also a great cross country team on the grass. So I think she's a perfect fit from that point. She kind of fits in everywhere. And you can kind of say the same thing about D'Souza, who's a 211 half miler. She's run 10:16 over 3,200 meters, 17:15. I think Boucher is wildly underrated. She's run 10:20 for 3,200 meters, but more specifically 10:09 for 2 miles, has a 4:46 1,600-meter PR. I think Boucher is really the other one where I go like, yeah, I mean, like, is she a tier below David? Yes, but I don't think there's another tier between her and David.
Yeah, and that would be fantastic for this Virginia team if she can be right there as a supporting piece for the next 3 years, right behind Tatum Davis. I think they would take that in an instant. Moving on to Oklahoma State, just another class that has a nice range of women coming in. Lauren Ping coming in, a lot more distance focused, 1640 in the 5K and cross country, 1016 and 32. But then you have someone like, um, is it Isis
Uh,
Simone Grant?
I do not know.
Who comes in with a 204 PR in the 800, which is just fantastic. And then you add in Mandeep Sangha, who comes from Canada. She's run 207 in the 800, 934 in the 3K. She looks like someone who is going to be a huge DMR piece for them in the future. You just have to really like what you have from this line. And then you have someone like Victoria Legat, who showed some flashes during this cross country season. A lot to like in this class.
A lot to like, maybe the most well balanced.
Hmm.
I think star potential in maybe all four.
Yeah.
Grant is way better than people will realize. Like I think she might be a massive win, especially because they're about to graduate Gavadite. 204. I mean, you're talking about
Yeah.
like, hey, because she qualified for the national meet this spring. I don't think
Right.
that's out of the question. It's just everything they cover everything. I think there are fair questions to be asked, and that's why we maybe held this class back to six a little bit. Lauren Ping, right? A lot of her best times and performances have come
Yep.
earlier in her high school career, and then Legat. We haven't really seen much. We don't have any results or any marks to review or analyze, and that's hard. But of course, I'm going to trust Dave Smith with when he brings in a Kenyan who is also going to run well at the Cowboy Jamboree. That's
Yeah.
usually like a good sign. History suggests that. So there's just some elements of unknown there, and because of that, I think that's why we put them at six. But I do love this squad; it's great.
Yeah, and I think Ping is kind of the woman who unlocks this class. If she is who her PRs has kind of say that she is, then she is absolutely going to be a huge contributor if she can continue to progress and improve on those times. And I think she's really what takes them to the next level and makes this arguably a top three class if she really comes good. Let's go on to Notre Dame, and this is a class just that is so deep. You have so many different names. Grace Shater is probably the one who leads this line or leads this class. She comes in with a 919 3K 456 in the mile PRs. I mean, that 919 is so impressive for
Yeah,
someone that young to come in and be that close to running under 910, which I feel like is a good barometer of someone who can really contribute in a big way on the grass. And I mean, 3K obviously, I think it's a great event just to show that you have a lot of versatility as well on the track. And then you add in a lot of other women. who have really strong PRs. And I think this class goes what, 7 deep. I mean, it is just a
Yeah.
very strong, deep class.
Yeah, there's really not a weak point. Like, I don't know who the weak point would be. And like,
Yeah,
I think
everybody's got some
they
value. Yeah.
all exactly. They all provide some level of value, and you have multiple heavy hitters, many of whom are going to be needed for the long-term replacements of
Hmm.
both Markovic sisters, Vanderland, probably some other women I'm not thinking of right now. But there's just a lot. There's a lot of great. Like Shager is so good. I think she's going to be a stud with Notre Dame. I just think she's going to be their next. Whether it be Sidell, Markovic, whoever it might be. I think she has that kind of upside just based on what her skill set is as a pure aerobic centric runner. Um, but I think what really makes this class so good is Gresham Farley running 204.
Yeah.
And this team has desperately needed 800-meter talent. They need middle distance speed. They like to go after the DMR. And
Hmm.
it's always kind of felt like they had Caitlin Ryan lately, and she had run well, but they now have someone who I think could be like a true standout name in the 800 meters while still building out their cross country program to be a competitive team.
Yeah, and your DMR point, I think, is significant. Even if she doesn't run the 800, for her to give them flexibility of running the 8 or the 12, and they have obviously a host of names that you would think they're comfortable with, and that 1600 leg. So yeah, I think huge amount of versatility with her, and just that 204 PR is, again, like we talked about it with Grant for Oklahoma State. It's just a elite PR to come into college with.
Yeah, and Arian Olson with this 444 1600-meter PR, 10:08 for 3200 meters, 16:45. I mean, she's just phenomenal too. And like the fact that she's only just now getting mentioned is wild. So, all right, moving on to the men, we got Tennessee at 7, BYU at 6, Stanford at 5. Tennessee has, I think, how many men did we
Ridiculous.
say?
15.
I think there's 15 men, which is absurd. And I mean, really, trying to go through them all, the guys that who you really need to know are, oh my gosh, let me see
Dean
here.
Casey,
Dean Casey, thank you. And then I'm trying to
Pavel
figure out.
Vinduska.
Thank you. That's the other name I was looking for. You got Casey, who's going to oversee the longer distances, has already made great contributions on the grass. And then Menduska taking over 800 meters and 1500 meters. I think 341, 342 for 1500 meters. And then guys who just dominate. I mean, who are just so good across the board. I'm so impressed with how deep the squad is. They have guys who have run, well under 9 minutes for 3,200 meters. They have four different guys who have run 153 or faster who are Venduska. The list goes on and on and on. They got, Hudson Betts, and they got Jacob Nenow, and they've got Nathan Chu, who are guys who have, run well in the postseason, have great top tier championship experience. There's not a flaw on this team. They may not have the firepower, but I mean, they have everything that you could ask for.
Yeah, this is a kind of recruiting class that back in the day you would have seen like a lot of 920, 925,
Yep.
like 3200-meter guys. And this, when you have 15 guys, that's, I mean, that's usually just how you fill out the roster or a recruiting class. And with this, it's a bunch of 9 flat guys or under that, which is just stunning. And I mean, Casey, I think, has the biggest potential to really be a star for this team, and Venduska is probably that second guy. But I think the only reason why we don't have them higher is they don't have that one or two guys that you can really point to and be like, we feel like you're definitely going to become an All American at some point. And I think Casey is a good bet for that
I think
in
Casey
grass.
is. Yeah, for sure.
But it's just that they don't quite have that star power. But goodness, I've talked about this in recruiting, I think, a lot of times. Recruiting can just be like buying lottery tickets. A lot of these, you're betting on high school kids. I mean, we all remember what we were like in high school. You just don't know what you're going to get as you make that transition from high school to college. And when you have 15 lottery tickets, you're going to be holding at least one
Yep.
winning one when it
Yep.
all comes said and done. And that, I think, ultimately more than anything is why you have to love this class.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's basically it's just a game of numbers, and We know they probably already have one great guy in Casey. Even if they're just a couple that don't work out, it will be a very good class, and I think the structure and sustainability will be there long term. However, I think the team that I love the most, who I mean, I'm reading this and I'm going, oh my gosh, is BYU, and I called them. I called you about them. This class is unbelievable. Carter Cutting has run, I think, 148. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, he's run 148, and double check that actually. Is that right? But long story short, this class is loaded with middle distance guys that they've never really had before. Um, they've got a ton of guys who are like top tier milers, a lot of which run at altitude, guys who are great in cross country, sub 9 marks. Like, I mean, it just goes across the board. It is so impressive. Um, yeah, I just can't say enough good things about this team.
Yeah, they're Tennessee. They're basically Tennessee with just a little bit more firepower and a little less depth. I mean, this is still a class that brought in, I think, 9 guys, and but they are just all so good in so many different events. I mean, you have several guys. I think 6 guys, maybe under, or 5 guys under 150, like 152 or faster. You have a host of guys who have run sub 410 in the 16, and then you add that to add like a bunch of guys under 9 in the 32. You don't have that. I mean, I think Cutting is that probably identifiable star, but you don't necessarily have a ton of identifiable stars. But you have just so many high quality guys that you would just bank on at least one or two of them really coming through in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm just in love with the firepower. There's very few weak points here as I try to figure out where this 148 came from. I think it was at Brooks PR. Um, yeah, I think it was at Brooks. Yeah, it was 148.98. I think he ran. Um, I just like that. I mean, like they have addressed all their weaknesses. They've doubled down. Now, again, a lot of these guys might be on missions, right? And that's
Yeah.
probably going to be something to remember. So it might be a while before we see them. I think it's probably I would have liked them to put them 4. I would have put them as high as 4.
Let's move to Stanford then, and make the case why I think Stanford. And this is another one that Garrett called me about, and we had a hard discussion about this, and ultimately we landed with Stanford at 5. And again, this is not a recruiting class that boasts a ton of depth, but what they do have is firepower, and the two obvious names are Lex and Leo Young, who came in and maybe weren't quite as good as some people expected this fall. I was always a little nervous about them being relied on too much as true freshmen, but they were solid contributors right away, and their PRs on the track are incredible. And I just, you have to expect that they'll become all Americans on the grass, and just that kind of firepower ultimately I think is what I value the most. And when you have 2 guys like that, it's hard to put them any lower than this, I think.
Yeah, I don't really like feel like we need to spend that much time on
Yeah.
this. It's largely just a matter of like we know how good Lex and Leo Young are. Milos Kempinski is going to be probably like a really solid contributor over
Yep.
the long term. Like he's a really good third name to have in that class. He's not just like a developmental guy. He's good. Um, but I think we know what this class has. It's just a matter of what do you value, and I think the averages of what we value puts them at 5, and I think
Yep.
that's more than okay. So that's all I got.
On the women's side, coming in at number 4, we have Tennessee. At 3, we have Oregon. And at number 2, we have NC State. And as we talked about on the men's side, the Tennessee women brought in a heck of a class. You thought 15 was a lot? We'll try 19. 19 women coming in this recruiting class. Jesse Secor comes in with a 440 PR in the mile, 210 in the 800, was very good on the grass right away this past fall. And that's just, she's just the tip of the iceberg. 19 women. Again, I talked about lottery tickets. You have 19 women who have the potential and have shown the potential during their high school careers of being significant contributors at some point during their careers. And that kind of depth is staggering.
It's just sheer depth. That's the value of this class. Sheer depth. But I will say this. I don't know. I think we would be having an argument whether or not they would be ranked if those rookies didn't have such a
Yeah,
fantastic fall
so good.
campaign. I mean, Secor was fantastic. Caroline Lowry was, I think, 72nd at the national meet. I mean, maybe even better. Oh, no, she was 90. I want to say 91st. Jillian Candolino was a 72nd or somewhere around there at the national meet. No group of rookies have, I think, proven to be better as a contingent
Yeah.
this past fall than those Tennessee women did, and that's really where the value is because they have sheer depth and they have tons of event balance. Like they have 5 women who have run 2:10 or faster for 800 meters. Hollywood, I believe, being the one who has run 2:09, and then you stack that up with all of these sub 4 or 5 minute 1600 slash milers. Great depth over the longer distances. I think they would have been closer to 10, but then they had all that success on the
Yeah.
grass. I think that's ultimately what boosted them down to 4. And so not as much proven like starred caliber firepower on the track, but after that fall campaign, there's no denying they were ranked.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of the basis for this next evolution of Tennessee track and field and cross country moving forward. And they've clearly proven to be a talented bunch. Let's move on to the Oregon women, headlined by Kate Peters. Comes in with 4:17 PR in the 15, 9:25 in the 3K. Uh, some really fast times over the grass as well. You also have someone like Lily Cridge. Again, just a very high impact group that another coach looking to make a big splash as they're trying to build this new program.
I thought you meant Kate Peters from Stanford, and I was like, and it's just spelled differently, and I was like, I don't think she's the marquee recruit. I was like, oh yeah. The fact that Cridge and Peters are the two like heavy hitting 1-2 punch of this class, and yet it was Katie Clutie, I don't know how to say that, who ended up being the impact name this past fall,
Sure.
is I think that's fantastic value, and that's really what you're getting. I think all 4 of these women are phenomenal. Like we're only now mentioning Alora Marcow. She's run 4:42 for 1600 meters. That's
Ridiculous.
incredible. That's really good. It's like really good. Clutie's run 9:28 3K. Peters has run 9:25 3K. Ella Thorsett, who we're just mentioning now, 4:53 mile, 9:42 3K. I mean, you're talking about like legitimate. Thorsett would be maybe not the marquee name, but she would be a top like 3 name on maybe a ranked class that is maybe
Yeah.
in our top 10, but the others are true marquee standouts, and like everyone provides an impact. They match the mile centric to cross country ethos that they're trying to establish at Oregon. Perfect class across the board.
Yeah, Coach Flanagan is just trying to make sure that they have 3 All Americans in the mile every year. And
Yep.
I mean, this is what they've done in the transfer portal and what they've done with this recruiting class. You wouldn't bet against it. Number
No.
2, at NC State, and I mean, obviously Leah Stevens. I mean, talk about the season that she just had this past fall, and I mean, she came in with great PRs. 9:15 in the 3K is probably the most potent one. And I mean, just her ability to be an impact scorer for a national champion team from the get go this fall was just incredible. And NC State uh, don't win without her. I
No.
mean, they needed her through. She was like one of the most consistent runners for them the whole entire year as a freshman. I mean, one of the best, I think, and certainly one of the more under the radar, I think, best true freshman seasons that we've seen in a long, long time.
Yeah, she was an All-American prior to the national meet. You know, like she
Yeah.
had put together a season that said like, "Hey, she's All-American kind of talent." She was 3 spots off of that. I think that was maybe her quote unquote worst race of the
Yeah.
season, maybe. I mean, like, which is absurd to say. And so having her brings a ton of value. But then Angelina Napoleon running 2:03 for 800 meters, running 4:46 in the mile, being like someone who can actually contribute on the grass. She's run 10:15 in the 3K steeplechase already. She was 16th at Foot Locker. I mean, the sheer, I think she's more valuable from a resume standpoint than Stevens right now. Or at least, let me say this, when they first came into NC State.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
probably Stevens is probably maybe after that season
Superseded.
she had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that is just, I mean, that might be the best range of anyone in this class. In fact, I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Kate Putnam, 205, 419, 441 mile. I mean, she's also great on the grass. And then when Mia Hall, Jelena Corzo, I mean,
Yeah.
great runners. Like Hall's run 10:28, Corzo's run 10:19, and they are the secondary women in this recruiting class. I mean, again, you look back 5 years ago, those would be marquee names. Those would be marquee times. Like people being like, this person's going to be amazing. And so what I love about this class addresses the future, instant impact names, but they're wildly dynamic and they heavily address the middle distances, which has frankly not been something that NC State has really, put an emphasis
Yeah.
on in recent years.
Yeah. And I think that will hopefully pay dividends for them on the track. And with women only being 6K in cross country, I think you can take advantage of having some middle distance runners who can still contribute. We've obviously seen like someone like Amaris Tanisma be a huge contributor after being more of a 1500-meter runner on the grass. So I think that's a sound strategy for them moving forward. Let's go to the men's side. And coming in at number 4, we had Wake Forest. At number 3, we had New Mexico. And number 2, Oregon. And just like we were talking about one star freshman who made their name this past fall in Leah Stevens, the same can certainly be said about Rocky Hansen. Wasn't able to finish out his season due to injury, but what we did see of him was as good as we've seen from an American true freshman, maybe ever, but certainly in a long, long time. He was better than what we saw from Grant Fisher his first true freshman year. I think he ended up finishing 17th at NCAA's his true freshman season. I think it was certainly realistic to expect Hansen to have beaten that if he would have been able to run at NCAA's.
Yeah, I mean, this class, I think across the board, even for someone like Jack Radbill, who doesn't really have the craziest times, but he ran his 159 800-meter PR, his 416 1600-meter PR, and his 903 2-mile PR within the same 3 days. That's awesome. I think that's like a massive like win. Like usually guys like that, you're like they're developmental guys. Maybe they burst onto the scene and they're great. I think that's actually huge. I think he's like just beginning to tap into his potential. He clearly has so much more to offer. I really like that. That was sneaky good. And and then when you're talking about someone who's like a developmental name as like a really good, a pickup, I think that just goes to show how good this entire recruiting class is. Like as I look through each of these names, Ty Garrett, Rocky Hansen, Hunter Jones, again Radbill, and then Ross and Shipsy,
hmm
they're all long distance guys. I mean, sure, Shipsy is more mile based actually a little bit. You can say he's a little bit more middle distance,
He can
sure.
do everything.
Yes, he can do everything. But there's a reality where all of those guys are developed for the 10K, which is
Yep.
exactly what Wake Forest needs. They're clearly going for something special over the next few years. Maybe not in 2024, but maybe in 2025 they are. And so I think this is a massive, massive win because I look at all these guys and I go, they're perfect for college. Move up in distance, go to cross country, aerobic centric dominant guys, go after it.
We had conversations about this team possibly being a national title winner in the next 2 or 3 years, and this class is predominantly the reason why. I mean,
Yep.
they are outstanding. Got good experience this year. They look like they have a true low stick. You can't say enough about this group. Let's go to number 3, New Mexico, who are probably the only team that can credibly say they have an even better freshman that they brought in than Rocky Hansen, and that is Haptum Samuel, who was fantastic this year. Came in with a 13:13 PR in the 5K. Backed that up running, what was it? Was it 13:14
Yep.
or 13:14 this December? Was awesome during the cross country season. Runner up at NCAA's. I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard plenty about him. And then they also brought in some other great names as well, Kane Shields and Stephen West. I mean, just a group that has redefined New Mexico in this new era.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. I don't know really if there's anything more
Yeah,
to
I
really
think that's pretty much it,
go ahead.
honestly.
Like I mean, they're just three superstar Kenyans who are awesome, who have already proved to be awesome. Kane Shields adds nice little versatility, speed based thing. Stephen West, I think, is extremely underrated. Garmin running lane national champion. Maybe not the NXN or Footlocker champion, but something to keep in mind there. And so, yeah, I mean, great there, but I think we know where the value is, and we all know why they're three.
And I think Kiplagat and Kiprop, I didn't really mention them. I mean, they've been even better, I think, than we maybe
Yeah,
expected, like,
they
from the
have.
get go. I was a little skeptical. I think I was all in on Samuel, but I mean, yeah, those two have more than lived up to their billing so far. Coming in at number 2, we had the Oregon Ducks, and I mean this lineup just from like a just U.S. high school scene is, I think, a fever dream for most coaches. Simeon Beerbaum, one of the best, just multi-dimensional runners in the country that we've really ever seen at the high school level. You have someone who can run 147 in the 800, 337 in the 1500, and then turn around and run 1439 in the 5K on the grass. He was sixth at NXN, fourth at Foot Locker, just everything you want. Connor Burns, same thing can be said about him. 13:37 in the 5K on the track. I mean, how many times? I mean, how many times do you get a 13:37 runner even on the portal? Like, to get one with 4 years of eligibility is absolutely fantastic. Sergio Del Barrio comes in with some great middle distance chops, and can run the steeplechase. This is just, I mean, I could keep going. There's a lot of other great names here, but this class, if it wasn't for who was number one, I think would be number one in almost any other year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm looking back actually at some of the teams that ended up being number one. 2019 was Washington. They had Sam Affolter, Luke Hauser, Dan Mayton, Sam Tanner, and Joe Wascom. That is a
That's
heck.
unbelievable.
That is
That's even
one.
better than what we probably expected at the time.
Yeah, that ended up being like a crazy good one. Notre Dame was pretty ended up being pretty solid, but yeah, I mean, I think this is probably up there. I think they have an argument. I think we'd have to do way more research, but at least in terms of our freshman class rankings over the years, I
Yeah,
think you can make the argument that they're the best American, you know,
American based. Yeah.
yeah, best domestic recruiting. Even with Archie Noakes, Sergio Del Barro, and is there another guy who I'm thinking of, or those are the only
Um.
international names? Yeah, those are the only international names. So even with those guys, so maybe it's a little bit closer, but like Burns and Birnbaum aren't just stars. They're not just superstars. They're elite. They're
Yeah.
elite high school superstars. They're probably the best you can get. I mean, they were probably in the top five last year. Maybe not quite there, but for Burns, but maybe he was within the top 10. I mean,
Beer certainly.
he
I
at
mean,
one
certainly
point,
maybe one.
yeah, Beerbaum was one, but
Yeah.
I think Burns at least was in the top 10. And
Yeah.
this is a guy who broke the 5K national record, and then someone else broke it, Lex Young. So I'd put him probably 4 or 5 from last year. But then Sergio Del Barro to run 151 in the 800 meters, but also run 839 in the steeplechase. Taysom Echohawk is
Ridiculous.
ill, doesn't have a great beginning to his spring track season in senior year, and yet he still runs 4:01. Archie Noakes runs 7:53 for 3K and 13:52. I mean, this is unreal talent. Unreal. And I think it's probably on almost any other year, they're number one.
Going to number one on the women's side, this Stanford team. My goodness. We had high expectations, and so far we haven't seen quite everybody, but what we have seen has been quite tantalizing. Amy Bunnage from Australia, instant impact this past fall. 15:21 in the 5K, 4:14 in the 15, 8:51 in the 3K. Just was awesome this last year. Had a probably one of her worst races of the year at NCAA's and was still 59th. Irene Riggs. I mean, I don't think it's arguable that she was the best cross country runner coming in out of this class, and we haven't quite seen her yet, but she is someone we expect to be able to lead this team next to Bunnage over the next few years. You have Sophia Kennedy, you have Hillary Studert. You got depth, you've got front end firepower. This class really does have everything you could ask for.
I mean, Madison Schultz has run 2:04. Kate Peters has run 2:06. Riggs and Bunnage, I mean, like, it is so overwhelming. And yet, I think last year's Stanford class is better.
Well, when you have Willis and Whitaker,
Yes, does that help? Yes. I'm
that's
not doubting that.
pretty
But now
amazing.
they now have back-to-back years where now they're yeah, I don't it wasn't just, Willis or Whitaker. They had other names,
No, but
but
I mean, just you have two women who come in and are title contenders in the 800 from
yeah.
the word go. I mean, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, and I agree. But I mean, this class is still so absurd. Like the Riggs, Bunnage, Kennedy trio. I mean, even top programs that we've maybe mentioned in our rankings would kill to have a recruit like that. Just one of those recruits once every 3, 4, or 5 years. I mean, those
Yeah.
are studs. That's probably the best long distance trio of recruits in the nation. I don't know
Mhm.
how it wasn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No
even
question.
with you kind of think of some of the overseas talents, I think that was it, which is so wild. And then just to have the 800 meters further build depth there, Madison Schultz, who can also run 17:11 in the 5K. She's run 4:45, 4:46 in the mile. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, how many different ways can we say that they're unbelievably good? Like
Yeah.
Bunge is a
I mean,
star, Riggs is a star, Kennedy's a star, Schultz is a star, and then everyone else is still really good. So
yeah. I mean, these last two classes just leave us shaking our heads. I mean, if even like a quarter of these women reach their like full potential, this is a team that can win every single title in every single season. And that's not an exaggeration. You could have a true blue title contender in the 800 through the 5K to the and indoors, 800 to the 10K outdoors, and then a contender in cross country. Like this is how good these two classes have been. And I mean, like if you're talking about a team that could realistically like win a track title just based off of their distance program, Stanford could absolutely do that in 2 years. No doubt.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why this is such an important and impactful class, which is like, hey, this is such a young roster overall. This is such a young team. The idea that they could do something special and get on the podium, and we've been saying like they're trying to get over the hump the last couple years, right? And they haven't quite done that yet on the grass, but they're just phenomenal. And so I'm going to transition us to the number one men's team, Oklahoma State. I mean, look, they've got what 15 guys. Half of them are international studs. I mean, we all know how good Dennis Kipnagich was. 13:26 this past December in the 5K, fourth at nationals. Brian Massal 7:38 for 3K, which was a number four all time for the 3K in the NCAA. He was eighth at nationals. You have Adiso Guidi. I don't know.
Mhm.
He's run 28:17 for 10K. He's from Israel, excuse me. LeBron Kipkemboy. We don't
Kimboy,
really know
yeah.
how good he is, but Dave Smith has also been like, no, he's really, really good. Like, here's his rough PRs, and
And he would know, man.
yeah, and he would know. They got Hamish Hart, who's run 8:20 for 3K. They've got who's I believe Australian Jacob Deacons run 14:18 for 5K and 8:21 in the 3K. And then you have a slew of guys who run 4 away in the 1600. You've just sub 9 and 3,200 meters or the 2 mile. Like Aiden Granados is just awesome. He's 14:28. The list goes on and on and on. Matthew Thomas, Jerry Mendez, David Mora. I mean, I can keep going. Ian Kemeny, it's just incredible stuff. So we know why they're good. They're deep. They have firepower, and their depth is better than everyone else's depth, and their firepower is better than everyone else's firepower. That's why they're top.
I mean, I think the most succinct way of saying this is how good this team or this recruiting class is they made up a large portion of one of the greatest cross country teams we've seen over the
Yep.
last 10 years, and we haven't really even seen all of them.
No,
That's the crazy part is they
we haven't
still got
seen
a
we
lot
haven't
of
seen
guys.
Kipkemboy yet.
Yeah, we have a lot of guys that could be really good and like in the next like few months and make us realize that this recruiting class has gone up even another level. And that's the scary part is they can still reach greater heights than what we've already seen, and what we've already seen would put them number one even in like a retrospective. Like if you just took their accomplishments from what they did this fall and fast forward everybody else 4 years, you would probably have a good argument that they would still be number one.
There's a realistic argument, which is wild. So all right, I think we're done. There's only so many ways that we can say that. Ben, thank you so much. Is there anything that I missed?
No, I think we're good. This was fun. I hadn't really done a huge deep dive on the recruiting rankings until now, and it was fun to kind of go through all of those with you and see what the next generation of NCAA stars are going to look like.
Yeah, yeah. So, for those on content, we've got D2 and D3 freshman class rankings coming out this week. I believe D2 should already be out by the time you're listening to this, or at least close to. No, they should be out. Indoor track previews are coming back. We have that coming back. I'm working on a few other things for the site. It's a long took longer than I thought it would be. And yes, the Apple Podcast thing I just learned before I got on here, so I'm trying to fix that. It might have really screwed up, but Ben, that is all I have for today.
All right. Well, until next week, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.